you. Right. Plan's been doing this State of the World's Girls report since 2007, so we've had quite a lot of experience. So I just click this one, do I? Of looking at some of these issues. And in this year, in 2014, we had a report on pathways to power, where one of the key arenas we looked at was the media, both in terms of traditional media and new social media. And in 2010, we looked at the digital world and girls' role in that, and the benefits and risks to girls and young women of the new digital environment. And I think originally we saw the whole thing, wrong one?
Press the arrow.
Might be that one, yes, sorry. As, if you like, social media particularly as a new platform for old kinds of bad behaviour, which is what sort of came across very strongly, particularly in 2010 when we were looking at it. And also we did some scanning work for the 2014 report, and some of the stories that you got around the invasion of privacy of girls in social media was absolutely terrifying. And so we looked, it is very true, I think, that both traditional media and social media do reinforce misogyny, that because sex sells, though I do take the point that we do have a lot of good campaigning journalism, but I think the overall context of the environment that we're talking about is to reproduce rather than challenge negative stereotypes. And also, often just the presence of women in the media is, it's not in sort of terms of news, in terms of being movers and shakers. You don't see women as positive role models in this way. They're much more likely to be seen as victims. And I think even when you've got the media looking, as we've mentioned, at rape cases, that is still only dealing with women when they're in the news for those sorts of reasons. There's not enough sort of to create a different environment about why women, might be newsworthy. So, and we did some research, or looked at some of the research around. In fact, even somebody from the International Journalists Federation was admitting that, in fact, women are seen in very specific ways: sex kitten, mother, witch, and the other side of it is that if you're there as a corporate climber, you're seen as probably a bit of a bitch, really, a bit hard-faced. So I think that those are the images that we're dealing with quite a lot of the time. And online, I mean, the negative way of seeing some of the proliferation of new online and social media channels is there has been an increase in pornography, child abuse and grooming. That the private, which is even more scary, I think when I was growing up, if you did something really daft, only your friends knew about it, whereas now virtually everybody knows about it, including a future employer. It's just up there, you can't get rid of it. And some of the stuff that our document, that some of which I didn't actually put in the report because it was too horrific in a way, shows you that the images that are out there and the behaviour it portrays is really very frightening. And bullying and sexual harassment take on new and worrying forms, and it is young women who are big users of social media, much bigger than young men, so of course the impact on them is going to be even greater. But thank God there are other ways of looking at this, and I think one of the big pluses of new media, social media, is that it does provide a means of escape from the constrictions of the life that you might be in, particularly if you're living in the global south in a community that could be very conservative. And it's true, obviously, all over the world, that you can get your information not from your parents and the immediate community around you, but you can get it from a much wider base. And I think that one of the things that does, it enables you to imagine for yourself a different life from the one that might be immediately present. And I think that is really, really valuable. And it's something that the girls and young women that we've been talking to do talk about quite a lot. So though internet and social media can increase objectification, it can also be part of the fight back. And the 2014 report was actually quite a depressing one to work at. We looked at pathways to power and we looked at progress, and in fact there hasn't been a massive amount, but what we found out was that people talked about gender justice and gender equality. They understood the language, but actually underneath it all, less had shifted. So you've got some progress, then you get several steps back. And that was true of things like violence against women. But the one area where I did come out feeling slightly more optimistic was this area around media and the opportunities it was presenting to girls and young women globally. And we did some fast talk research, and this young woman in Kenya makes the point that it's lack of information and education that keeps women down, and that if you have access to different ways of finding things out and different ways of seeing and different stories, you are able to feel stronger that there's more out there than meets your immediate eye. And I think, again, things like everyday sexism, there's a lot of these projects out there at the moment, and they're all very vibrant and interesting. And though it provides evidence of devastating misogyny in a lot of cases, it also gives you the information and supplies a solidarity that is part of a fight back and a part of an increasing activism, I think, amongst young women. And that's got better, I think, in the last 5 years. And we talked a lot to young women about this idea of collective change, that working together, finding each other online, organising online, being able to communicate was a really big plus. And I think the other thing, and I think it's true in quite a lot of parts of the world, but I know there's particularly the use of soaps in the media has been a really good, and I think there is some research that says actually it's been a really effective way of getting stories across. And I know Plan did something on female feticide in India, where the storylines were about a woman who refused to abort her second child because it was a girl, and that really did have an impact. And I think there's quite a lot of that in Latin America, and that's really powerful and a really good way of using traditional media, I think. And I think there's a lot more of it. And I think when something like EastEnders started, there was a lot more of that sort of stuff in there as well, rather than the more extreme cases where it's less likely to happen, inshallah, to the rest of us. But I think the use of soap is really a really valid way forward and a great power that the media does have. So this is the sort of information that we were getting back, that the internet gives us freedom because it takes us to other people, places and other realities. You can't be controlled in the same way. Obviously, there are risks out there. But I think in terms of information and escape in closed societies, that there is such a lot of benefit in new internet and social media. And I think the thing that's interesting is there is obviously, between traditional media and social media, there's a lot of cannibalization. And I think the traditional media will report on stuff that's happening in social media, and if there's more activism going on, or there's more positive stories going on, they will be reflected across the media, and I think that's also really valuable. And the key other thing that also came across from the girls that we speak to is this whole business about being provided with the right sort of skills and the right sort of tools. And I think the thing that's happened in the last 4 years since we did our original research is that there are more platforms, things are more affordable, there's more access, the digital divide is being tackled in a way that it certainly wasn't some years ago. So this is, you know, we talk to the girls and young women that we work with, and this whole business of collective action and harnessing the power of the media to become a positive force for change and protect against its more invidious aspects. So I think the digital divide, providing skills, harnessing the power of soap to tell stories, and producing positive role models, so the portrayal of girls and young women in the media isn't in the context of being abducted, of being raped, of being killed, you know, or of being sexy, in inverted commas. And I think that's, and so things like the Page 3 campaign, where you've got an image of a young woman that's counterbalanced by the young women who are campaigning to get rid of it, is really great. And I think that sort of stuff needs to be, I'm sure it will be carried forward, because I think that one of the things that I came away with, having been rather depressed by a year of reading stories and research, was this new activism that does appear to be coming through the system. And it is more than a clicktivism, and I feel, you know, that the younger generation are doing a great job, and for that I'm really grateful.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. I mean, just one quick question from my side. You talk about girls having access to this, bridging this digital divide. I mean, what's your sense of how much, you know, girls in poorer communities have access to that kind of media versus traditional media? I
think the use of mobile phones, for example, has gone up massively, and on that there are now, funnily enough, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's really up on this. There's so many more fairly cheap platforms where girls can actually access information. So, you know, you don't have to download an app, which you don't have the power to do. There are other ways of doing it, and I think it's one of the things that NGOs and donors generally can actually think about, is finding these cheap, easy, accessible platforms through the phone. I think that's the easiest and probably the most prevalent, and it's definitely got better.
Okay, great. So on that note, across to Caroline to give us the key findings of your report.
Thank you.